Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss the women's basketball collegiate recruiting process and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guests today are co-owners of Fourth Wall College Consulting, Holly Johnson and Shannon Wagar. Holly has 10 years of experience working in college admissions. She is passionate about helping families navigate the college search and application process, as well as educating communities about access to higher education. Shannon has extensive experience working with high school students and their families as they navigate the college application process. As a first-generation college graduate, Shannon understands the impact higher education can have on a family. I'm stoked for this episode because it's the first time I'm having guests on that have expertise in the application part of the recruiting process. Thank you both for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yes. And Shannon, I did ask you how to pronounce your last name before we got on, and I hesitated because I was nervous. So I hope I did it correctly because I blanked.
You're fine. You're perfectly fine.
All right. So can you both, or one of you, however you want to answer it, take us through the entire college admissions process? You can just kind of touch on points and we can dive a little bit deeper, but that whole process from when a student starts to think about college to their first day on campus.
Yeah, I'll lead us off here. So when you look at this process, I find a lot of times kids don't necessarily think about this as early as sometimes they should. Student athletes, I feel like they gain more traction faster. Because again, they found this love, right? Whereas, other kids that are, business engineering are not necessarily thinking about, what I want to do with my life when they are, ninth grade and forward. So the things I would say, kind of starting from ninth grade, moving to that process of going off to college. First thing is to think about making sure your classes count. Make sure you're taking the right courses that are relevant to you, that are relevant to your goals, because, these athletes are not going on to necessarily play sports for the rest of their lives. They're going on to play sports for an education to move into a career. So, thinking about the classes that are going to make sense for what that career looks like. Make sure, you're also within that taking classes that help you stand out. But don't necessarily take these big classes that are not going to work for you, right? You want to keep the GPA tight. I would say as you roll into sophomore year, between sophomore and junior year, start thinking about touring colleges, maybe within your local region, to get a feel for, what does a big state school look like? What does a mid-size private school look like? What does a rural college setting look like? Kind of figuring out your wants and needs from a setting perspective, and get the feel, get the vibe of the school. So make sure you're going when the colleges are not on break. It's kind of a key point. You want there to be activity, because if you go when it's not full of life, it's going to seem a little dreary. But also after that, start identifying your wants, your needs from a college, right? Do you need the Greek life? Want the Greek life? Do you want it to be smaller so your professors are more focused on you, right? What makes sense for your wants and needs, and how you want your education to go. Holly, I'll let you jump in and take us through the last couple of years, because it's kind of your wheelhouse right here.
Yeah, so then in junior year, hopefully you have a little bit of a sense of what you're looking for, so you can start putting together your wish list of colleges, and we'll go back to that in a second. But just start thinking about some schools that fit those categories that you've identified. You also really want to start thinking about your standardized testing, so the SAT, ACT. We are seeing quite a few schools going back to that with the class of 2025. So while we did have a couple of years where test scores didn't matter, it's looking like they're going to come back here pretty frequently. So when you're thinking about SAT or ACT, remember that it's always good to try each one. I would do practice tests. They are very different exams. So they ask questions differently. ACT has some other sections. Kind of get a feel for which fits you best in your learning style. And then you may have to take the one that you choose more than once. So it's not necessarily a one and done. Some other things you can do during your junior year to get ahead for your senior year, you could make sure that you are asking for your letters of recommendation from your teachers before the end of junior year. At a lot of schools, teachers have so many people asking them for letters of rec that they can only do a certain number because it's just overwhelming. So get ahead of it. Ask by the end of your junior year. A lot of people won't do it until they are a couple weeks into their senior year. So if you ask by the end of junior year, you should be able to get on with your letters of recommendation. And we recommend ideally contrasting letters of recommendation. So maybe you have a math or a science, and then you have a English or a social studies. Also, you want to make sure that at least one of those letters of recommendation come from a teacher that you had junior year. You can also go ahead and start your Common App profile. So make a Common App account, and the profile section is just demographics. Go ahead and fill that in. Usually by the end of February-ish, Common App will confirm what their essay prompts are for the year. There are 7 options. You only have to write 1. Go ahead and start writing that essay. And in general, just do your best to get good grades. That's going to be the secret to most of this. Senior year. Okay, so you're launching into senior year, and Elspeth, I'll of course make sure that you're plugging in the athletic part, but just in big picture, you're going to go ahead and start submitting those applications. Usually about mid-August, most of them are open. This includes writing additional supplemental essays. So it's not just a Common App essay. Many schools have anywhere from 1 to 3 commonly. We do know a few schools that have more than that, but typically it's not more than 3. You need to start considering when you apply, what deadlines are you using? We always recommend early action, or if they have a preferred deadline, you're going to get a decision back quicker on your academics. And my experience with athletes is that tends to be when the coaches want you to be applying as well, as to meet that early deadline. Then you get to have fun with your family and apply for financial aid. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. Apply for any scholarships. These can be in many places. First off, hit the scholarships associated with the school you're applying to. And then, of course, search your community, and we'll get more to that as well. Then eventually you have many options, and you get to make your decision by typically May 1st. Next step is, once you've decided where you're going, what the enrollment process is. Now, the college that you choose is going to talk you through this, but basically it's like pay a deposit, register for housing, register for your first year coursework, and then just pack and plan, meet your roommate online, and go ahead and move in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Was a very thorough response, and I'm thinking about it. That question was pretty broad, so I appreciate how much detail you both went into.
We had to bullet it out to make sure that it was still a quick answer, even though there were so many things to go over.
Yeah. So with you two, you both have just such a great level of experience working with students who are going through this process. Like, what do you view? Or like, can you just talk a little bit more about your role, like how you help students throughout the college admissions process?
Sure. So my husband always likes to call me Yoda. Like I am the guide. I am your project manager, right? Students and families will come to us. Typically, I would say the majority of them January of their junior year. And, randomly we'll get a few that come sophomore year, which allows us more time to help them plan the right courses, look at what they've taken, talk about what they're thinking for majors, where they headed off to. So we're kind of the guides, if you will. They come to us, they've got a list, we help them, work that list, make it a little more balanced. We talk them through the essays that are associated with the colleges. We help them edit essays. Wow. I mean, there's really not much we don't cover with students.
Except do the work for them.
Except doing the work for them. We're not filling out financial aid forms. We will help guide them through what financial aid process, like FAFSA, CSS, which again, we'll talk about later, but we guide them through this process, but we're not the financial gurus. But anything associated with an academic application or helping them, navigate to an extent athletes, because they'll come to us and go, okay, the college is telling me I have to do this, 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 and this. Okay, so we put it in kind of a timeline that makes sense based on what the college is asking for.
I would also add that we're interpreters of the higher education language. If your listeners have not yet already, they're going to get spammed by colleges. And as a former college admissions spammer, I do apologize. But yeah, sorting through all the messages, which are the ones that are most important for you to be paying attention to, which ones have action items. And then once you've made your decision, how to make sure that you're depositing, you're filling out the right paperwork, and just kind of helping them understand what all the mailings and things they're getting means to them.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because when you're like 16, 18 years old, this decision is like the biggest decision you've made to this point, arguably,
Right.
in your
Yeah.
life. And it can be so overwhelming, like you said, Holly, with all of the emails coming in. That's same on the
Yes.
recruiting side too. It's like texts or emails or calls from coaches are coming in and they're saying this, but at the end of the day, having somebody to help decipher all of that communication is super valuable, because like we always used to say, somebody gets paid a lot of money to make a website look great, right? Like you said, Shannon, you don't know what you're going to like until you get on the campus and you get that
Right.
feel for
Right.
for exactly what you might like, or what sounds good, looks good, feels good. Were you about to say something, Shannon?
Well, I was going to say, and probably much with athletes, like, with performing arts kids, okay, they're coaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter
Mm-hmm.
how you look at it, they're coaches. And so I feel like a lot of times kids are like, "Ooh, I like this," but then they go and they work with the coach as well, and they're like, "Yeah, no, this is not happening."
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like there's a lot to be said for that interaction with a campus, to figure out if the vibe even fits you. You may love the coach, but the rest of the campus is like, I know this is entirely too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like there's just little pieces to help navigate through at some point.
Yeah, and I just recorded with somebody else the other day on Sunday, I think it was, and that's kind of what she said in so many words. Is she said, see as many campuses as you can, because then you'll really get a feel of what you actually like, what you
Right.
actually don't like. Like you might
Yep.
say, I always said, I don't want to be in a city. Like I definitely not. And I ended up going to like finishing and going to grad school in a city, and I was like, okay, this is not so bad. And had I never like even gone or visited or done anything, I would have just thought in my head,
Right.
I don't want that.
Right.
So yeah, definitely important to kind of experience things firsthand. So then what are certain common hurdles that you help families work through? I know that you talked a little bit about like essays and just like the nitty-gritty of the process, but is there anything specific or certain themes that you all see?
Essay
Yep. Yep.
specific or just hurdles in general?
Hurdles in general.
Yeah, essays is definitely one, but honestly, a lot of times families like to have us as the motivator. And as
Mm,
as she mentioned, we're kind of the project managers. So if we're the ones setting deadlines for the students for I need this essay by this, or you need to submit this by this, we're kind of the bad guy. So we kind of take it off the parent so the parent can better just enjoy this process, and potentially, their last year with their student in the home. And so students don't want to let us down. So they tend to be more likely to abide by our recommendations. And then essays for sure. It is really easy to write a basic essay that answers the prompt. But as somebody who's read how many hundreds of essays, you really need to have it stand out and really speak in your own voice, and tell your true story. We see with athletes, a lot of times we get the overcoming the obstacle story, which is an option for the Common App, and they tend to read very similarly because it tends to be, a situation where they were in a tournament perhaps, and it's not going well, and then, the team morale is down, and then they had to help motivate their team. And that's an important story, especially for an athlete. But when admissions officers are reading dozens of essays a day, it's not going to stick out. So making sure that the student is being heard as a unique individual in an essay is definitely a big one.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure I can think of other hurdles really that we go through. I think the biggest one is understanding that it's not just one essay. Like I would say more than 85% of the time, it's at least two essays for college, and the kids will sit down and great, I've got my Common App essay done, and then all of a sudden they go into the application and oh my gosh, here's one more essay, and oh, if they're going into a STEM field, great, there's an engineering departmental essay, right? I think that there's a misconception that it's there's just the one that has to be done, and that's not always the case. And then, yeah, I think that's the biggest hurdle. I don't know others that we really encounter, other than understanding, follow the deadline, right? Some people want to rush through this. That's not the way to do this.
I thought of one.
Okay.
Helping to manage expectations.
Yes. Okay.
First and foremost, looking at the grades, the GPA, the classes that the student took, test scores potentially, and helping them understand what that means for likelihood of admission. I mean, even with your athletes, you've got to meet a minimum. And you have to show, of course, other qualities, not just being really great at your sport. So helping families understand that you do have to have the grades and the test scores to back up your natural talents. And we have families come to us all the time that they say, okay, here's my list. And it's unlikely that they're going to get into 80% of the schools on the list. So, I mean, if the family says we definitely want to apply to these schools, of course, we're going to make sure that they know how and help them as best we can. But it's our job to try to manage expectations up front, and also make other suggestions for other schools to consider. But I think it's easy for families to not understand the actual likelihood of admission.
Yeah, and I think this might be a common misconception in the sports world of, well, I'm good at my sport. The coach is gonna I'm like elbowing admissions to say like this kid's fine, like just kind of push him through. And I know firsthand, I'm not going to mention the student athlete or the school, but it was a high academic Division I institution, and her senior year, her grades were not great. And they were telling her, you have to get these grades in order to be able to get in order to be able to come here to play on this team. And so it happens, it does happen regardless of your skill level. Like you said, you have to be able to get into the school, so you cannot ignore the academic side of it. So I just wanted to repeat that again, because I know firsthand of a student athlete who was talented, going to a high academic Division I program, that almost did not get in because of her grades her senior year. So yeah.
And that's a really good point, especially that you keep saying senior year. You have to keep up the momentum senior year.
Yes, correct. You can't just let it go.
If you suddenly, you could be admitted to a school, and then if you get senioritis and just, sleep all the way through the last term, and they get your final transcript and they see that you were doing great and then suddenly not doing anything, that's kind of a red flag. It doesn't happen often because most people don't do that, but it is possible to have your acceptance rescinded for something like that. So yeah, senior year is important for sure.
Yeah. And I don't think it's, I would hope that most student athletes don't follow that trend, right? But I can see some saying, "Oh, I have an offer from this school from a basketball standpoint. I have an offer from this school. I signed my national letter of intent. Like, I'm going there. I'm good. Like, I don't need anything else. I'm going there." And it's like, no, you actually still have to get into the school. You have to be admitted into the school. And I think that is just so I'm so glad you said that, because that is just such a good point that I think, or that I hope isn't overlooked. But if one person thinks that and they hear this, then they might change their tune. And I think that would be worth it. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that for sure. You mentioned junior year, you said somebody comes in. Actually, I think you already said that. So let's just move on to kind of scholarships and just additional aid. So I know that at D2, D3 level, athletic aid, is either limited or just non-existent. Do you have any resources or advice for student athletes who are looking for other scholarship sources?
So again, I go back to the first comment that we made: exhaust whatever is at the university. Like, if you're talking D2, D3, correct. It's academic merit money you're after, right? So this is where keeping your grades up, doing well on standardized tests if they're required. That's where these all come into play. I am a fan of exhausting your options at a university first. There could be departmental scholarships based based on the major you're choosing.
Mm-hmm.
Some athletes will go in undecided. They're like, okay, I just want to get there, get my feet under me, get my sport going. Okay, then I'll figure out really what makes sense for me. And others go in. I had one several years ago. Again, he was D1 though, but nonetheless, he knew exactly what major he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got somebody going in for engineering, playing a huge sport. I'm like, how in the world?
Yeah.
But he did it.
Yeah.
But you go in there could be departmental scholarships for engineering students, right? So look at what's available at the university to begin with, and see where you can exhaust all of those. Because when you start looking for outside scholarships, many colleges will not allow you to stack the money from outside and within the university, which could then trigger them lowering your merit aid that you had initially received, right? And when you look at it, that merit money from a university is typically 4 years, right? So if you've been offered, I don't know, $20,000 every year for 4 years, and you're like, okay, I'm going over here and I'm going to get this little scholarship. Love little scholarships. Take them all. Buy yourself a new laptop to go to college. I don't know, something. But those little scholarships can add up and then affect what you get from the university, because the universities will ask, do you have other scholarships? And if they ask, please don't lie to these universities. It does not behoove you to be that person. But when you bring that in, they could say, okay, you're bringing in $5,000. We're reducing your merit money. These outside scholarships are typically one time only, right? So now you have lowered your 4-year from 20,000 to 15,000, and that 15,000 carries forward for 4 years, and that 5,000 you brought in is only good for 1 year.
Is that a common occurrence?
It's more common than not common.
Okay.
So there's an easier way around that. So when you're looking for outside scholarships, when you're reading the description and that kind of thing, go for the ones where you get a check in hand, where, Shannon Wagar gets a check in hand. It's made out to her, $50, $100, $200, whatever it is. So Shannon can choose how she spends it. Spend it on the computer, put it in an account for your travel expenses. Maybe that's your pizza money, Chipotle. Maybe that's, a new outfit when you need it or whatever. So consider whether or not a scholarship from an external is being sent directly to your school, or if it's coming to you directly. So then you can decide how it's spent.
Right. And if it's that's where it gets sticky, is if it's being sent to a university specifically, that's when they're going to see it. Right. So what they're asking you basically when they say, are you receiving outside scholarships? They are referring to, are they going straight to the university, not being to the student. So if you had one, for example, back in Georgia, we had multiple like Friends of the Library competitions, right? Okay, you're talking $150, $250, right?
Love the library, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, use these resources. I mean, high school PTAs sometimes give out scholarships.
Look in your community.
Rotary Club, anything like that. So, those are some easier ones. I won't say easier ones. That's the wrong term. There are many of those out there. You have to search these out yourself. There's just not this massive database that is comprehensive enough to show all of these. But they're out there. So search within your local area for those. Reach out to the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, the Friends of the Library.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And some high school PTAs will offer these up. Look for those first, because they're handing you that money. And again, my son had one as well, going off to college, and he bought himself a laptop. So it wasn't like it's being sent to the university and therefore is being considered with your merit aid. So that being said, there are some outside search engines that are great that many of our families use. Imagine is one. Imagine is a little different because there is a fee attached to Imagine. I believe right now it's $99 a year, $149 a year, right? And you can go in, complete one application, and it will let you match to whatever makes sense.
Okay.
And then you can actually carry that one forward through college as well. So if you renew your subscription, you just keep being able to apply for more throughout college if you find that you need additional funds as you go along. Another one similar to Imagine is called Going Merry, MERRY. same thing, except there is no fee attached to Going Merry. You have Unigo, UNIGO. That one's been around for a while. Their biggest claim to fame, I guess, I would say claim to fame, is that they have monthly essay contests. You can earn $150 up to, like, I think the December one is worth like $1,000, $1,500. You can earn more than one, and they will bank that money for you and give it to you in one lump sum if you win more than one. The interesting thing with Unigo is you can start as early as your freshman year banking this money. Yeah, kind of interesting. FastWeb. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I'm just trying to think logistically how that works. So that they're just like earmarking that for when you go to college, or okay.
Apparently, yes.
Okay.
I have never had a student actually want to sit down and write more essays, so I don't really know exactly how it works, but that is the best I understand it from webinars I've sat in on. It is, yes, they're earmarking that money, and it's set aside. Where that money has come from initially, I honestly could not tell you, but it has been around for years. So Unigo, and it's unigo.com. There's also FastWeb, FASTWEB.com, another similar one to Unigo, where it's just this massive database of millions of scholarships.
I'll add one more. Bold.org is another one I've had a student have a lot of success with. And Elle, I can send you these if you want to put them in the episode notes or anything.
Yeah, let's do that, because excuse me, there's so many out there, and I feel like there's like 25 more probably.
Yes.
And I wish they could all just like combine in some way or something to make it a little bit easier, but I guess what would be the fun in that?
The one thing I will say about Going Merry is that that's the one where you do have some input. So like I living in Georgia, if I knew and had access to know all of the scholarships in Georgia, I could load them into Going Merry as regional options.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting how that one works. They're still trying to get traction with getting people to crowdsource. I was just about to say
it's like a crowdsource open source type of thing where you can just.
Right.
But then how do they check the validity of some of these scholarships? I don't know. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of how they work.
Dive into that one, but yes, I agree with you. How and do they change? And yes, they do, which is why when it comes to local regional things, that's why we tell kids, first of all, check with your high school counselor, right? Do they have a resource in their office, right? Check with your high school. Does PTA offer something? Friends of the Library, Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, church. Yes.
Yeah. Just, I guess, think about anything that you're involved in or your family's involved in, and ask like a local restaurant or a local something that you like to visit. Just see what they have, because there are a lot of people out there who want to help and give money, but you have to be able to find them and ask. Yeah. All right. Very good. That was comprehensive again, so I appreciate that. And I look forward to like putting those in the notes for the show. So I'll do that. Can you both explain the changes to the FAFSA this year? I'm a part of a bunch of different groups, and that's like a big question that parents get, and it pushes the recruiting timeline back a lot for certain programs. So
yeah, I'm gonna let Shannon go into the nuts and bolts, but in general, 2024 is unlike anything we're ever going to see again.
We hope.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
With the changes of the FAFSA. So this year is a complete redo. Shannon will go through more of the specific things, but just for your guests and your listeners to know, this one's weird.
Yeah. So and I'm not gonna get too in the weeds, because again, one of my favorite phrases is, I know enough to be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
This one is, there are just so many changes and they're having issues, so they're having to make more changes. So when you ask me what are the changes, it's hard for me to go, okay, this is the change. I can give you a couple of the big ones and what we're seeing at this point and how things are being affected. And then, if you want to ask other questions, I'll see if I can dive in and answer better as we get into the summer. You want to talk about this again once this is done? More than happy to talk to you about FAFSA again. But let's talk about the higher level pieces. Is that the biggest thing is they've shortened the form. It's gone from 150 questions ish maybe a little more, a little less, down to like between 70 and 80 questions. So they've basically cut it in half almost as far as the questions they ask. The other piece that is that everybody was excited about, that, right? Less to fill out, right? The other piece that they did that people were not as excited about is that they no longer consider, FAFSA no longer considers the number of students you have in college at one time. Now, a college can override that, but as far as FAFSA is concerned, they will not generate what used to be called EFC, expected family contribution, is now called a student aid index, SAI, S as in Sam. And that is the total dollar amount that the government says or you can afford for that student for 1 year of college. We all know it's a lie. There aren't money trees like this growing all over the country. So, but in the past, if you had more than one student at a time, let's say your, what they called EFC was $70,000 a year, and you had 2 kids in college, great. That now meant that each student, basically it was cut in half. So each student had you could pay $35,000 a year. That's fabulous when you have kids that are going to these high dollar institutions, right? You've got a student going over here that's $70,000 a year, one over here $60,000 a year. You can tell there's a huge gap there. Oh my gosh, we're getting in the weeds already. You can tell there's a huge gap there, right? But when you have more students in college, that gap gets wider, right? And so colleges will then be able to help with that need that is there if they fill need. If they're not considering the number of students in college, if they say you can afford $70,000 a year and you've got 2 kids in college, that's $70,000 a year per student.
Yeah.
There's no more gap. There is no more need to fill, right? That's where the colleges are allowed to use professional judgment to override some of these things. And they will even take into account if there are younger siblings who are in private school that you're paying for. College as well.
Okay.
FAFSA will not, college as well. Okay, so we're way in the weeds. Let me go back to my forest level instead of my tree level. The other thing that they've done is that in the past, there are, if grandparents had put aside money for students, it kind of was in a way held against a student, right? It factored into that aid index that we're looking at. Now, not as much. So grandparents could have 529s in their name and it's not affecting, the student because they are not the ones that are listed as what they now call contributors to the FAFSA. So those are kind of the big changes that I would think about. I know that there are so many others that are part of this, and if you want to contact they can really talk you through this. I'm happy to give you that person. I can talk very high level about this. I can talk forest level, not pine needle, as I say, level, right? I can give you a big picture, but here's what we found is that because there were some issues with FAFSA this year, clearly it was delayed, then they found more issues. That's the reason we're seeing this further delay. Initially, colleges were supposed to have received FAFSA by February 1. Now it's March 15. So follow the trickle down from that. And now what we're seeing is that colleges are delaying that May 1 for this year's graduating class. Do not expect this going forward. It's going to be much like a COVID year, right? Where 2020, they pushed it out to June 1. Yesterday, what is today? Thursday, Wednesday, the UC system in California announced that they are pushing May 1 to May 15. So instead of students having to commit by May 1 this year for the UCs, it's May 15. When you see a huge system like the UCs say, this is what we're doing, there will be other institutions that start following suit. Not all of them, clearly, but there will be institutions that follow suit with that. There were a few that even a week, 10 days ago, when FAFSA realized they were pushing to March 15, that announced they're going to June 1. So again, we're seeing this trickle down of the information's not getting there, right? And Holly can honestly speak more to it from the collegiate side than I can. I can speak to it from, again, the forest level of how this all processes. If you have schools that use CSS, the counterpart to FAFSA, many colleges are relying on that as their base. And then when they get FAFSA, they'll readjust.
Okay. Yeah, because you said the deadline now is March 1, correct?
The typically the deadline for FAFSA varies between schools. But in the past, well, what was supposed to happen, FAFSA was supposed to open by the end of December. By the end of January, they were supposed to be disseminating that information to colleges. 2 weeks ago, they were like, it's not going to happen by February 1. We're pushing, it'll be March 1. And then 3 days later, they were like, no, it'll be March 15 before we disseminate information to the colleges. Which means the colleges have less time to process, right? If you're looking from March 15 to May 1, that's 6 weeks. That is not a lot of time, when sometimes in the past, Elspeth, these colleges got this financial information as early as December 1. So they had, I mean, think about that. They're handing out all this financial aid in January, February, and the kids have till May 1. Now you're asking a college to process the information, turn it around, and a kid to make a decision in 6 weeks, or a family. This is a family decision, not a truly just all the time student decision, right? So you are taking what could be a 6-month process across it and crunching it down to 6 weeks. So it's a mess.
Because I'm thinking more so like maybe some Division 2, Division 3 institutions where that aid package is so important to get. So it's like you can know exactly what school you want to go to. Let's say it's a Division 3 institution, you know exactly where you want to go. But until you get that aid package, you really, unless you're able to full pay, which is great for some families, but not all families can afford that. The FAFSA really matters. Getting that aid package really matters. So then it like pushes this whole cycle back, and it's just so much more stress. I don't know, Holly, did you want to speak about like that, or at any point from the school side?
No, I mean, I'm feeling lucky that I'm no longer in formal higher education to see the chaos that's going on as my colleagues are experiencing. No, Shannon hit the nail on the head. I do think that with the smaller private schools, even if they, declare May 15, June 1, with a smaller private school, they're going to have a lot more flexibility. If a student needs a couple extra days past the deadline to, hear from another school or that kind of thing, especially if, the private school says May 15, but the other school that they're considering is June 1. I think a small private school is going to be able to give a lot more flexibility. But yeah, it's just changing day by day.
But you all both said that you don't anticipate this issue moving forward.
I don't anticipate it.
Don't anticipate. It's a good
I
way
don't anticipate it. Here's the thing: if for some reason this is going out there, and like right now, seniors are hearing this, patience. Please give some grace to the colleges. Please know that the colleges want this information to be out to you as quickly as they can. And if there's somebody out there that has already done FAFSA and you're sitting there, it's fine. There's no way they can hold you to a timestamp this year, because the system has been so up and down, so many changes, so many, delays. So yes,
everybody
you will
just
be fine.
Practice patience all the way around.
Yeah, exactly. Patience and grace all the way around. That's all you can do. But no.
This episode will come out, I think, either the beginning or the end of March. So it'll be almost perfect time. Yeah, it'll be relevant for sure. And I did want to touch on something again. I think, Holly, you said this earlier about the SAT and ACT, because I know for the past couple of years it's been like some schools are accepting it as like if you want to give us the information but not requiring it. But it sounds like you said that you're seeing the trend go back up to places requiring it and using it as a metric.
Yeah, I mean, I think we won't really know for sure which schools and how many schools until typically colleges will update their website and their admissions policies and procedures for the next year by end of June, beginning of July. So we won't know for sure, but there's a lot of research right now going around. Dartmouth just put out this big article that is causing some waves in conversation about the importance of test scores. So yeah, I mean, we always tell our students we at least need a baseline score, and then using that score, looking at your school list. We have some different metrics that we use for test optional schools to compare the students' scores to pass middle 50% of admitted student scores to basically figure out even if you should go test optional or send your score. So there's some different things that happen in there. But yeah, I definitely think we're going to see test scores moving forward, especially 2025. It still may be transitioning, but definitely 2026. But there are still some really great things that have come out of COVID, the COVID changes. Schools in general, even if they want test scores, they're a lot more holistic with their review. So they're putting more pressure on the essays and your activities, your extracurriculars. So they are still looking bigger picture. It's not just like 50% on your grades and 50% on your test scores. They are definitely considering other things. So that could be helpful.
Well, and I know for athletes, the NCAA pulled back on their test requirements a couple of years ago. That's the one I have not seen if they are going back and adjusting those standards on test scores. And again, that's not my total wheelhouse with how that works. But for me, I wonder if they will go back to a different level, a different standard with their test scores in the next year or two as well.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to follow up with, I think, just to kind of see, excuse me, where different, I don't want to say industries, but different facets kind of go with the test scores and all of that. So I just glanced at my time, and I want to make sure I appreciate both of your time, so I don't want to take up too much more. So let's just get into this. What are some common mistakes that you see? I almost said student athletes. What are common mistakes that you see high school students make as they're going through that application process or thinking about schools that they might want to go to?
So I'll cover one thing and then Holly jump in, cover the other. I think one of the biggest things that the places that they make a mistake, and I didn't say this last night when you and I were talking, was I don't think that they totally consider their list, and have it be a balanced list. You need to have some schools on there that truly, even the athletes, okay, great, you've been recruited, right? This is what you want to do, but you need to have a second plan in place. Anything can happen and you could just all of a sudden go, no, I'm done. Or you could, heaven forbid, be in a tournament right before and tear something, ACL, MCL, knock on wood, that never happens. But we know these things happen. So having a plan in place that says, okay, these are my other schools that I'm targeting, and making sure that even that list is balanced out. Don't just pick 3 random schools that you're never going to go to, because you could end up at one of these institutions. So making sure your list is balanced, regardless, athlete not, that you have the right schools on your list that fit you, that you are happy to attend. We always tell our students, if you are not going to go to that school, if that is the only offer you have and you're not going to go to that school, please don't put it on your list. That is a waste of resources, yours and theirs. So I feel like that's kind of the biggest mistake, is these kids reach for all of these highly selective schools, and having a list of Harvard, Brown, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, Dartmouth, Cornell. That's okay, great. You spread your net wide across a highly selective group of schools. We need to talk about the big state schools, right? The small private liberal arts schools. We need to have something else in there. I feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes that gets made.
Yeah.
I would say from the college admissions perspective, people rush and don't pay attention to what they're looking at. So every year this happens so many times that students would want to get a jump on things early, and they'd be like, oh, look, there's an application open, I'm going to start filling it out. Well, it was the application for the previous year. And that's a pain in the butt for college admissions, because then they have to go in and maybe it created a new record and they have to clean it up, or now there's 2 applications, Or then when the new application does open and you go to fill it out, it says, no, you already have an application started. It's a mess. So pay attention to like the dates of the application, as simple as that sounds. Also submit your application before you have your transcripts and test scores sent. Again, people want to get a rush on things and they're like, oh, I know I have to send my transcripts and or maybe test scores. I'm going to go ahead and request and have those sent in. Well, if those things arrive to an admissions office before you have an application, they just float around. We used to call them orphan documents at my previous institution because they didn't have a record to belong to. And that actually can delay your admissions decision because they're going to keep thinking that they don't have material for you because it's kind of out here in the abyss, not attached to your application. So in general, just don't rush, pay attention to what you're filling out. And just, while we love people getting things done early, I mean, if it's up to us, we have our students have like 5 essays done even in the summer. But don't rush your submission process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because sometimes just wanting to get it done means that it won't be as thoroughly checked, or it just won't have as much intention or thought put into it. So I think both of those are really good points. All right, so I have my last couple questions, and Shannon, I just thought about before we were recording, you said if we go through everything, we'll be here for hours on end. And I'm like, yeah, we could definitely sit here and talk for like 3 more hours about this whole
Yes.
process. But
Very much.
yeah, so my last couple questions, and if you both agree, you can use the same answer or you can use different answers. But what book or podcast would you recommend every incoming first year read before like their first semester begins, and why?
So we talked about this last night and we couldn't really come up with one that we thought was a must, but we did come up with a must quick tip, which was
Okay.
another option you gave us.
Yeah.
Email addresses. Make an email address just for college, just for all of the applications, everything. Do not, hear me very clearly, do not use your school issued email address. Your school issued email address from your high school has a lot of firewalls and protection on it. And if you use that, a lot of the things that are important for you to get from colleges will not get to you.
And you would think that college emails from an institution would come through. I've had students miss academic acceptances because
wow.
the high school blocked a college email from emailing that student based on that high school email address. So if you hear one thing from this today, this is it. You do not want to miss important information. Sorry, Holly, go for it.
No, it's great.
No, that's a great tip, I think. Keep going. What were you gonna say, Holly?
Yeah, so make a designated college email, check it often. We found success with a lot of our families if a parent also has the login information for that email, so that your parent can go through, and Shannon did this with her son, and cleaned up the ones that were just kind of the spam or the willy-nilly information, and then made sure that her son went in and addressed the ones that were necessary. So that's one strategy, but the email address is a must.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I fully agree with that. I mean, that is the best advice that anybody can take away at this point.
Yeah. And I might even also say, like, make sure that email is like maybe like a combination of your first and last name at something, not like I love school yeah, exactly. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, make it a little more professional, adult sounding.
Yeah.
I will say I agree with you. A lot of students that we've given this advice to, I've noticed a trend over the last couple of years that it is first name, last name, college, and then the year that they are graduating.
Okay.
Right. So first name, last name, college, graduation year at pick your favorite,
Yeah, exactly.
Most of them are gmail.com, but hey, whatever makes you happy. Hotmail, Yahoo, AOL, it's all there.
Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
All right. And then what is something about the admissions process that you all believe that other people in the same industry might disagree with?
We do not believe that every student is ready for a 4-year education to go immediately into a 4-year institution. You need to assess where you are, whether that's academically, whether that's financially, or even just, I mean, maybe not for your athletes, but maybe just for your life goals. I mean, trade school or an academy or something. But in general, doing a community college and transferring is a very good option for many people. So really need to kind of work on that as a family. Not everybody's ready to be on their own, or sometimes, maybe high school was really rough and you need that extra time in community college to get those grades up so that you then could go to a four-year institution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I totally agree with that. That it's not even the right fit for everybody for your institution. I mean, trade schools are amazing and all of that. So, were you going to say something, Shannon?
I was gonna say I'm not necessarily sure it is our industry that would disagree with that. I feel like our industry, like other, independent counselors,
Right.
would fully agree. Where I find the struggle within that is that parents don't necessarily want to see that it can be a great option, right? To take a step back, take a year, whatever, take 2 years at a community college. I just feel like a lot of parents don't necessarily want to hear that. So you get a lot of pushback, but yeah, I 100% agree. It's not meant for everybody. My youngest chose to not go to college. He also graduated high school in 2020, right? It was not the best time. And so he is now working, in kind of in the film industry, if you will, and loves what he does. So why spend that money if there's something else you're good at and that you love, and you don't need to, walk away being in debt for, thousands of dollars. So
For sure. And so I feel like the email could have been this as well. So if you have nothing else to add, that's okay. But any, like final words of wisdom?
yep.
We have 2 points. I'll hit one,
All
Shannon,
right,
you
here we
hit the
go.
other one. So if any of your listeners are not yet seniors, so freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and you're looking at courses to take in high school, consider getting an A on an on-level course rather than pushing yourself to take an honors or an AP and struggle and not do well. Getting into a good college is not dependent on how many APs you have. So if like math is my weakness and you have to take algebra 2, consider taking regular algebra 2 and doing well in it rather than pushing yourself, stressing yourself out and not doing well.
It's a good one. Yeah.
My biggest thing, and this really comes more from a performing arts side, but I will say this for anybody out there: be authentically you. Please do not be somebody you think these colleges want you to be, because if you are doing that, when you get there, it's not going to fit. You are going to feel like an outsider if you have not represented who you authentically are, because it won't always end well, and you just will not find your people. You will not, find your vibe there. And that's just the biggest advice I can tell you.
And even before you get on campus, be authentic in your essays. Please don't write what you think the admissions person wants to hear, because it'll come across corny and it's not going to end well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Shannon, that exactly what you just said has been like the linking through line between all of the coaches I've interviewed. And that's what they've said. It's just like, be yourself, because it's about fit at the end of the day. And if you're not, like, it's not going to be a secret once you get there. Like, you're not going to be able to put up that facade forever. So
No,
yeah,
it's exhausting.
I think that's a great point. So all right. So if there's anybody who wants to keep up with you or reach out to you all for your services, where can they find you all?
So you can find us at fourthwall.cc, FOURTHWALL, all spelled out, .cc. I know the .cc sounds really bizarre, but it works. Or you can always email. You can reach out to hello@fourthwall.cc, Shannon at fourthwall.cc, Holly at fourthwall.cc. There's so many ways to find us.
I'll put that in the show notes too. So I'll put all of those resources for you all in the show notes, and so that they can reach out if they have any questions or are looking for somebody to help them through the process. But yeah, I appreciate both of you all being here so much.
Oh, thank you. This was fabulous.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're looking for more specific recruiting advice based on your situation, head over to hoopsthroughlife.com today to schedule your free 30-minute strategy session with me. We will discuss where you currently are in the recruiting process, where you want to go, and create a plan to get you there. Again, that's hoopsthroughlife.com, hoopsthroughlife.com. And if you have any questions for me or questions you want me to ask future guests, you can email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com. That's EL@hoopsthroughlife.com. I look forward to hearing from you soon.